Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is Atif Iqbal और आज मैं रिएक्शन देने वाला हूँ एक वीडियो पे जो कि है बियर बाइसेप्स वालिया नाम है इनका आई गेस बाय अभिजीत छावड़ा। अभिजीत छावड़ा को मैं बहुत अच्छे से जानता हूँ क्योंकि बहुत अच्छे हिस्टोरियन हैं। बहुत नॉलेज रखते हैं चीज़ों की और ये खुद भी आई थिंक साइंस बैकग्राउंड से बिलोंग करते हैं आई गेस। तो काफ़ी अच्छी मैंने इनकी वीडियो बनाई हुई है एक हिस्ट्री के बारे में जो नहीं जानते थे, सेवन हिस्ट्री दैट विल शॉक यू। वो बहुत अच्छी वीडियो थी। आई इवन दो कि मैं ज़्यादातर हिस्ट्री जानता था उसमें, पर इट्स अ वेरी नाइस वीडियो दैट यू शुड मस्ट वॉच। और ये वीडियो है कि द हिस्ट्री यू थॉट कि आपको स्कूल में सिखाया जाता। पहली बात कि मुझे हिस्ट्री में कभी इंटरेस्ट रहा नहीं है। आई वॉज नेवर इंटरेस्टेड इन हिस्ट्री क्योंकि हिस्ट्री मुझे बहुत बोरिंग सब्जेक्ट लगता है। नॉट लाइक कि ऐसा वाला कि तुम्हें अब हम अपने देश की हिस्ट्री नहीं सब पसंद है। मुझे ना कोई भी डेट या इंसिडेंट याद रखना मुझे अच्छा नहीं लगता है। एंड स्पेशली जो सीबीएसई का सिलेबस होता था, क्योंकि मैं इंडिया से हूँ, मैं करंटली यूएस पे रहता हूँ। तो जब मैंने स्कूलिंग कुछ वक्त के लिए किया था, मैंने वहाँ पे सीबीएसई का पैटर्न था मेरा। तो सब मुझे हिस्ट्री का ये पसंद नहीं है कि 1958 दिस दैट दैट हैपन, वो मुझे याद करना मेरा सर फट जाता था। तो आई थिंक जब टेंथ के बाद जब हमारी स्ट्रीम बदली तो मैं बड़ा खुश था कि चलो अब हिस्ट्री से छुटकारा मिला मुझे, क्योंकि आई वांटेड टू गो इन साइंस, स्पेशली इन बायो बैकग्राउंड। तो मेरा बैकग्राउंड क्या है, मैं एक रिसर्चर हूँ। मैं एज अ रिसर्च के तौर पे काम करता हूँ यूएस के अंदर। तो इस चक्कर में हिस्ट्री मुझे पसंद नहीं है पढ़ना। पर अगर कोई बैठ के मुझे हिस्ट्री समझाएगा सुनाएगा तो मैं याद कर लूँगा, मुझे याद हो जाएगा फट से। तो ये मेरी आदत है। मैं खुद से पढ़ के मैं कभी नहीं पढ़ मैं पढ़ ही नहीं सकता। और ये बड़ी अजीब बात है कि मैं रिसर्च लाइन में चला गया, क्योंकि इवन दो रिसर्च में बहुत पढ़ना होता है, बट आई गेस डिपेंड करता है कि आपका इंटरेस्ट और फील्ड क्या है। मेरा इंटरेस्ट थोड़ा बायो में या रिसर्च में लाई करता है, तो मुझे पढ़ने में थोड़ा मज़ा आता है। पर यूजुअली हिस्ट्री पढ़ने मैं नहीं पढ़ सकता, मैं 5 मिनट नहीं पढ़ सकता, मैं सो जाऊंगा वहीं पे। पर अगर आप में से ये ऐसी कोई अभिजीत छावड़ा वीडियो बना के डालते हैं तो मैं बड़ा इंटरेस्टिंग होकर देखता हूँ, क्योंकि ये डिपेंड करता है कि सामने वाला हिस्ट्री बता भी कौन रहा है। स्कूल में होते थे कि हिस्ट्री बताने वाला भी खुद बोर है, हम पढ़ के ही बोर हो रहे थे। लाइफ बड़ी अजीब थी। एनीवे चलो चल के इस वीडियो को देखते हैं और देखते हैं कि कौन सी ऐसी हिस्ट्री बता रहे हैं जो हमें पता नहीं है। तो स्टार्ट करते हैं वीडियो। अगर आपको अच्छी लगे तो ज़रूर कमेंट में जाके अपना फीडबैक देना, सजेशन देना, लाइक करना, शेयर करना, सब्सक्राइब करना, है ना। चले फिर स्टार्ट करते हैं। 3 2 1 गो।
Most people are taught boring history in school. I'm not going to lie. There were moments when I was learning history in school where I thought that, oh my god, this is such a dead subject. It doesn't benefit me in any way. But trust me, you're not taught the interesting aspects of history.
Exactly.
You're not taught ancient history. You're not taught lost history. You're not taught the history that we're living through today.
Exactly.
I promise you, this is one of the most interesting episodes of the Ranveer Show. If you've checked out any of our episodes with Mr. Abhijit Chavda, you'd know that they're always value adding, they're always mind bending, and this episode is probably right at the top of that list.
मैंने बोला था।
Remember to follow TRS on Spotify for more episodes like this, because we're a Spotify exclusive now. Every episode's available on Spotify 48 hours before it's available anywhere else in the world. But without further ado, this is Ranveer Alabadya and Abhijit Chavda getting into the subject that they love the most: history and modern day realities.
मैंने बोला था, और इसने भी वही बात बोली, रणवीर ने भी वही बात बोली कि बहुत बोरिंग होता है हिस्ट्री यार। आपका अगर हिस्ट्री सब्जेक्ट है तो मेरी
Abhijit Chavda, sir, we just did a special of science, which was fantastic, mind bending. Let's go into your other subject of expertise. Is that what it's called? Subject of expertise? Yeah. Okay. Sorry, my mind is still bent from the last conversation. But this time we're talking about history. Let's begin by modern history. Have you heard of this?
आई लाइक अभिजीत चावड़ा, बहुत ही कंपोज,
fisherman who was stranded at sea?
बहुत रिजर्व आदमी है।
Think of all of them. Okay.
Reserve,
here's the story.
compose,
So
I like
the
it.
story goes that there's this one Mexican fishing village where these two guys headed out on a boat which had a motor. Okay. You know, like a mechanized motor, but the rest of the boat was like wooden. Okay. So these guys went to do their daily job, which was fishing. And then there happened to be a storm, because of which they got stranded at sea. Okay. Then the storm kind of went away. And these guys almost reached back to their village. When they could see their village, their motor stopped working. Okay. and then the currents drifted them away. Okay. Now the total duration for how long these guys had gone is something like 2.5 years.
बरमुदा ट्रायंगल की बात है क्या ये?
And 2.5 years later, one of them was found.
I see.
And that guy survived to tell the tale. He wrote a book. The other guy who was not found, that guy's family kind of took this guy to court saying that you killed him, you ate him,
I see.
etc.
I see.
Basically, this guy, so this is their account, right? They got drifted away. And they got drifted away to a particular part of the Pacific Ocean, which is the least
Bermuda
traversed by
Triangle.
humans.
Bermuda
So
Triangle.
this is what people assume about large ships and merchant navy and the navy in general, that they've covered almost all of the oceans, but that's not true. There are certain routes that have been covered by manned ships and manned shipping vehicles. But most of the ocean is actually unexplored.
True.
Is it
We
Bermuda Triangle?
underestimate how much of the ocean is unexplored.
It's vast.
Yeah. Now these guys got drifted away to a part of the ocean where there's literally nothing. Like you can't see a ship anywhere. And the guy who survived, in his book, he's claimed that he was a very positive guy. And he used to keep praying to God, and he perceived it as a sort of test that God threw at him. And he said that the guy with him sort of started giving up on life and giving up on his existence. And it became like a willpower thing. The name of the fisherman was Jose Salvador Alvarenga. Alvarenga. There's a photo of him that have just been shown. So anyway, I think they took that photo right after the
He was discovered. Okay.
So
Is it
basically, the
Bermuda
other guy was
Triangle?
negative. And have you seen Life of Pi?
I have, yes.
Yeah. So a huge Life
Amazing.
of Pi scenario happened there,
I see.
where the other guy started slowly giving up on life, started losing his mind. And this guy was trying to at least in his book he's written, he was trying to convince him to be okay. He was trying to convince him that everything will be fine. But eventually that guy just gave up on life, died. I think it's more gruesome than that. I don't know the exact details.
I'm sure, yeah.
Yeah, but he died. This guy had to get rid of his body. And in the meanwhile, all the stuff that you've seen in Life of Pi, eating raw fish, harvesting rainwater, the first guy had to do that.
Yeah.
And he just survived on that boat for more than 2 years.
Wow.
Imagine 2 years.
He did not give up for 2 years, huh?
Yeah, and he had to probably brave the rain, brave the sun, brave sharks, brave whales.
All kinds of things.
Can you imagine actually being there? Then eventually, he I think he's also claimed that he always had that faith in God, that I'll be found. One day, probably around the day
No
he was
faith.
found, he saw coconut floating near him, and that's when he realized, I'm finally near land. After floating around for a bit, he figured that he's near some Pacific island, and then eventually he went to that island, and that's where he was rescued. So that's his story. But imagine 2.5 years at sea.
It's amazing.
If you look at it from a karma perspective, what kind of karma
He must have accumulated lots of good karma in the past.
Yeah.
To get that sort of
or bad to go through that? I don't know.
maybe bad.
Why did that soul go through that journey? That's what
Maybe it was destined to. Maybe there was a reason for it to happen.
Yeah, very intense story. And the catch is that it happened in I think 2016 or 2017.
Wow.
Yeah.
I see. Recent.
I don't remember the exact date. Just look it up. But imagine this recently. This could have happened to anyone. And there are stories of people being kind of out at sea like this. But when I read this whole article and it had haunted me, I thought about it for days. And I recommend that everyone listening to this podcast also hears this article.
I've heard of many such stories. I'm not sure if I've heard a story about someone resting at sea for 2.5 years. That's incredible.
Long.
But I've heard many stories of people getting stranded in regions where you have these eddies and currents in the ocean where you just keep going in circles. And there are these enormous expanses of ocean in the South Pacific, for instance, or in the Southern Indian Ocean also, where there's absolutely nothing for thousands of kilometers, So it's possible to get stuck there, and many such cases must have happened. They must never have come back, possibly. And there are these stories of these ghost ships and all that.
Yeah.
The Flying Dutchman is one of those stories.
Yeah.
Haunted ship that turns up from time to time but then disappears. So these things have been happening for quite some time, as long as people have been going at sea,
Okay, so there's this one crazy kind of tangent of history. I think I've spoken to you about this, which I learned from Graham Hancock, being on Joe Rogan.
Okay.
Graham Hancock is Joe Rogan's Abhijit Chavda. It's exactly that. That's what I would call it. And I'm sure you know Graham Hancock as well. So
Yeah.
I
so
don't know.
Graham Hancock is one of those historians who talks a lot about undiscovered alternative history. I've had a conversation about him with you.
Yes.
And you told me
Many
you don't
ganda
agree with
corner.
everything he says, but a lot of the stuff he says is revolutionary.
It is.
So, sir, he spoke about how the Amazon and the history we are taught about the Amazon is not accurate. Have you read about this now?
I have.
So here's what I know. One, while the Earth is currently going through a phase of global warming, it also goes through cooling periods. And currently we are in a warming up period. So we are just accelerating global warming because of our bad habits and the way we treat the planet. But this is sort of a natural state for this planet as well. But there are also freezing periods, at the peak of which is the Ice Age. Now the Ice Age doesn't happen overnight, it happens gradually. So snow also melts away, right? And I don't know whether it's during the peak of the Ice Age or during one of the melting periods. What happens is the snow will first melt away and the ice will melt away from near the equator. Because the equator gets heated up the most by the sun.
Yeah.
And that's why we are in a tropical zone or whatever. Now, if only the tropical zone is habitable, that means you draw out the equator on the line of the globe and you realize, okay, what are the countries that this covers or what are the continents that this covers? This is tropical Asia, Africa, South America, Central America. Okay, and maybe like a part of Northern America. Which means that only that one strip was habitable. Now, I believe in the Rig Veda or in one of the ancient Indian books, I think it was the Rig Veda, they've described the whole nature of civilization on the planet according to that time. Again, I don't know the exact date. You'd probably know it better, sir. But in that book, they've written that, okay, there was civilization in India and the people look like this and this is their behavior. Then there's civilization in Africa and this is their behavior. Egypt. Okay, then there's civilization in South America and Central America, where they've described shamanic civilizations and the Amazonian civilizations and ancient, whatever the predecessors to the Mayans were, etc.
Mayan
These were the
civilization.
3-4 main civilizations. Of course, ancient Mesopotamia is like one more in that bracket. Now, we are taught in school history that civilization began from around 2500 years ago with Indus Valley and Mesopotamia and Egypt. And Chinese, I think, is taught to us. But that's not entirely true.
Right,
We're not
right,
taught
right.
about the Amazonian culture at all. We are not taught that in India itself, it didn't begin with Indus Valley. It began way before that.
Way before that, yeah.
Egypt, those people believe that they were the modern versions of some civilization which began 50,000 years ago. So there has to have been
Shit.
some heavy level of ancient history which is not discovered yet.
Right.
Now, keeping that in mind, Graham Hancock talks a lot about a focus on the Amazonian culture. Now, the Amazon rainforest is this massive stretch of greenery, which is in the modern day being burnt in order to create soybean farms, I believe.
Yes.
Soybean. And that's
Yes.
when we hear about Amazonian rainforest fires, a lot of those are man-made. A lot of
Those are engineered, yes.
engineered, yeah.
Wow.
Because, again, for the sake of making money.
Yes.
While they're being burnt to create these soybean farms, what's happening is people are discovering these lost cities, which are probably there since years.
Shit.
Since millenniums. Since millennia is the word, right?
Shit.
Millennia. And it's just making us rethink human history.
What the fuck?
Again, this requires slightly
ये पता नहीं था
alternative way
मुझे.
of looking at it. I remember speaking about all this on a Clubhouse session. Have you heard of Clubhouse? It's an app.
Of course, yes.
And I got into trouble because people were like, how can you say that? But that's the nature of history. That I believe, and you're a historian, sir. History is also on that brink of rewriting itself all over the world. People are discovering pieces of history that are lost. And people are rethinking how they are looking at history. And
इसका
Graham
link दो
Hancock
ना.
highlights this a lot. So what they've discovered about those Amazonian civilizations, one, there's a lot of lost cities. Two, there were a lot of technologies that those guys developed, which some of those tribes in the Amazon rainforest are still using.
Yeah.
For example, I think they developed some sort of a soil, which was based on taking a lot of leaves and only burning them up to a certain degree, using that charcoal from those leaves and then mixing it with the actual soil, putting it through some sort of a fermentation chemical process, and that soil was supposed to be some super soil, which was used to grow plants way faster.
Yes.
So then they did more research on the Amazonian rainforest and they realized that, hold on, these trees can't be naturally found in this particular part of the rainforest, which likely means that they were planted by some human beings way back. Now, here's the beauty of nature. If you just leave trees lying around in a particular place, they themselves will start to reproduce.
Yeah.
Like if you cut down a forest, but then you leave it as it is for 20 years, you'll see that the forest regrows itself. 20 years is a very small time period in the timeline of the earth.
Absolutely.
So what they figured is these were cities which were inhabited by people. The theory is that the Europeans brought a lot of disease to these cities. Diseases that were never prevalent.
अच्छा.
Now keep in mind, Europe was a slightly more modern civilization as compared to this one. This one was there since the descending ice age, when the snow was melting away. Once the snow melted away, human beings went into Europe, stayed there because Europe became habitable by that point. Thousands and thousands of years later, the Europeans decided, okay, let us go see what's out there in the world. And they hit South America, they found all these ancient civilizations which had been there for like 50,000 years.
Shit.
They went, they brought their disease, wiped out all these people. There was this mass, I think, smallpox epidemic, right? Yeah, so the smallpox epidemic throughout the Amazonian rainforest. Lots of those people died out. Now, obviously, the winners here are the Europeans who had developed an immunity by that point to smallpox, so they weren't dead. They killed off all these people and they rewrote history. They said, yeah, there was no civilization here for like 50,000 years. Then they took imperialism and spread it to Asia, Africa, America, the rest of the world. And the history we're taught in our school textbooks is a white man's history.
Absolutely.
Exactly.
Which is what the white man wants us to believe.
Exactly.
But probably the brown man near the equator, the black man near the equator, the yellow man near the equator
They don't
has
matter.
a whole different history that's been wiped out because of imperialism.
Right.
What they're also discovering about those cultures, these Amazonian cultures, is one, it was wiped out. Two, the technology. Three, they had a very developed culture in the same way that we have the Vedas developed. They had a developed culture which is sort of retained by the shamans. We had someone called Dr. Mark Plotkin on the podcast who spends time with these tribal people in South America. And he spoke about how they know how to use every plant in the rainforest. They know how to use insects. They know how to use frogs for medicine. And they have cures to things that modern day medicine can't find. Again, modern day medicine is a white man subject. But there have been brown man subjects, yellow man subjects, black man subjects. So we kind of need to rethink history.
Very
That's what I
interesting.
feel. I think you can take it from here.
So we have been conditioned to think in certain mental patterns.
Very
And these
interesting.
patterns are the imperial colonial patterns of thought. And there are certain taboo areas that you can't go into. For instance, in India nowadays, those taboos are slowly being broken. That maybe the Vedas were not written only 1500 BCE. Maybe it's much before that. Even now, it's not part of mainstream history. But when it comes to the Amazon, you're absolutely right. There seems to be a very ancient history out there. The entire Amazon forest seems to be the descendant of gardens planted by humans, specific trees, like you said, with that super soil which has been discovered. And it takes, like you said, just 20 years for an entire forest to grow over a city. So it happened very fast, and maybe this was entirely an inhabited region like we are discovering now. And because everybody died out because of the plagues and smallpox and everything, so in just 20, 30, 40 years, the entire forest grew over there, and now it is being slowly wiped out, and we are discovering what's out there. So there is this dogma in America, especially North America, about not doing research into certain areas of pre-Columbian history.
Okay.
Because pre-Columbian history is the history of North America before Columbus came
Exactly.
to these continents. And the thing is that the entire nation of the United States is actually a stolen nation by the white men. There is an entire history of the natives, of the Native Americans, that extends back thousands of years in North America and South America especially. So in North America, especially more than South America, there has been this taboo against doing any archaeology about with respect to pre-Columbian archaeological sites. Just leave it alone. Don't. And there are certain laws that say that if there is a Native American burial or there's a chance of a Native American burial there, it should not be disturbed. So that ensures that everything stays hidden. And I think Graham Hancock has come up with a new book nowadays, recently, America Undiscovered, something like that. That's the name, I think. And he has gone into these things. So there seems to be a great deal of history. The entire history of the peopling of the Americas is going to be challenged now, because the conventional wisdom, like the Aryan invasion theory, is that the first humans came into the Americas about 12 or 13,000 years ago.
Shit.
only. But now we are finding evidence of people being there for more than 100,000 years.
Shit.
And this is flying in the face of the accepted dogma that all these mainstream historians in the Americas have been enforcing.
Yeah.
So we are soon going to see all of these colonial edifices crumble. And new history is going to emerge soon, including in India,
100,000
because India
years.
is also a very ancient
Shit,
land.
yeah.
Yeah, and again, as a modern historian like you, I'm sure you get a lot of opposition when you pitch these ideas. I mean, one clubhouse session threw us so much opposition from Twitter, and I'm just sitting there staring at all these tweets like, yo, this is the issue with, older science and older history, where older rules have to be broken at some point.
Right.
Which is also why I believe you're a scientist who's delved into like the world of history, because you realize that older rules were broken and new rules were created. Older beliefs were broken and new beliefs were created. And that's what I find fascinating about talking to you. So, coming back to history, sir, is there some kind of phase of history that I know you're totally into all forms of history, be it postmodern history, also modern history, whatever, medieval times. But let's end this particular history special, this mind-fucking history special, with maybe one section of what you take away the most as a historian, or what messes with your head the most.
Well, it's not any one particular thing. I like to look at history as from a big picture perspective. I like to look for patterns and the lessons we can draw from history. So there are a number of lessons we can draw from history. Like, for example, empires always crumble. Nations always crumble eventually. Civilizations and dynasties crumble. The Cholas lasted for 1500 years, but they also crumbled someday. And it's always because of poor succession. It's always because of lack of leadership.
There's this whole thing about tough times build hard men, hard men build easy times build soft men, and soft men build hard times.
It's a cyclical process, and that's something you see over and over and over again in
Nice,
history.
I like it.
So there are many timeless lessons that you can draw out of history. So that is what I look for. I look for the wisdom that you, and that actually applies in geopolitics today, I mean, if you understand history, you're bound to understand geopolitics. So these are the things that I look for.
I think something that I read around the time I first spoke to you, around the time we hosted you in this very room for the first time, was the nature of national borders. A great example of the softness of national borders would be Pakistan occupied Kashmir, POK. On any map of India that we study in Indian schools, India's drawn in a certain way. But POK is drawn as a part of India. In any map of Pakistan that is in Pakistani textbooks in their schools, POK is shown as a part of Pakistan. In the same way, I'm dead sure China and Chinese schools have their own maps. For all you know, North Korean schools have their own maps. What are borders at the end of the day? They are just man-made lines. It also brings me to the concept of nationalism and patriotism. I'm deeply patriotic towards my own culture. Towards what this landmass called the Indian subcontinent, and not just India, has seen over the centuries, over the millennia. That we've seen so much, and that's what I'm patriotic towards. I love what my people stand for, what's in my people's hearts. But purely in terms of these false lines that were drawn out by Britishers, I question them, is this really my country? That's what kind of bothers me, because I've also read that borders are constantly drawn, redrawn, broken. I've heard people like yourself who study geopolitics so much. Even I think Major Gaurav echoed this thought that maybe in 20 years there might be a reunion of India and Pakistan. These weird, groundbreaking concepts. And it sounds crazy, but we've been India and Pakistan for what? 75 years?
That's it.
Less than 100 years. Before that was one country. It was one country for how long? Millennia. We were one culture. So does that mean that we're going to become one country again? Does it mean that Afghanistan might join the super country that we create? What will our cricket team be like? What will the country be like? That's what fascinates me.
Life will be
What do you
fucked.
say about that, sir?
What I have to say is that countries, the nation state concept, it's a very recent concept. It's a concept that came out of European imperialism and the desire to divide up populations for the benefit of the elite, of the royalty. But if you look at the past 10,000 years of history, it's always been kingdoms and empires and dynasties. And today we are seeing a reversal to that sort of system slowly. If you look at China, it's again an imperial system. You can call Mr. Xi Jinping the president, but he's actually the emperor. Again, Mr. Putin, you can call him the president, but he's actually the Tsar of Russia. So we are slowly seeing a gradual reverting to that sort of system in certain parts of the world. So this nation state concept is a colonial European concept. It's not something that has been prevalent throughout history for thousands of years. And I suspect that within 50 to 100 years, we may be back to an imperial or a dynastic system in many parts of the world. And then India could become a civilizational state, not a nation state. And then you could see a reunification based on the kind of leadership we have in our region.
Yeah, I will come back to India. I just want to highlight one more nugget of information that I learned recently. So I spoke to someone who has invested a lot of money in startups in Africa, and Kavita Gupta, she's been on the show as well. And I asked her about Africa, about the nature of it as a continent. So she asked me if I've ever seen a map of Africa. And I said yes.
South Africa.
We call the map of Africa. So many of the borders are drawn straight. And the borders are drawn as boxes. What the fuck? Like, at least in India, the borders are drawn around main centers and a little bit outside, like Lahore and Amritsar for that matter, close to each other. Pakistan occupies that little landmass outside of Lahore. India occupies that little landmass outside of Amritsar. Right? But they're close to each other. In Africa, they're drawn as straight lines. Even Africa was taken over by imperialists.
Absolutely.
And they've done worse shit to Africans than the British and the French and the Portuguese did to Indians. That's what we don't understand about African history. While these imperialists were leaving Africa, many of them haven't left yet. There's still a huge European influence in Africa.
Right.
I believe Belgium still sort of rules over the Congo in some aspect, if I'm not mistaken. Now, what they did in Africa was that they divided the countries in such a way that they were able to divide the same tribe into two separate countries. They broke up the tribes. So if you go to those countries, the tribes actually have tribal pride and they don't have nationalist pride. So say there's the same tribe which occupies the landmass between Nigeria, and I believe Cameroon is next to Nigeria, or Ghana is next to Nigeria. But the same tribe is divided into Nigeria and Ghana. They probably don't feel as much love for Nigeria as they feel for their own tribe, half of which is in Ghana. So it creates so many problems in the country. It creates civil war in the country because tribes then fight each other in the country. It's a really messed up system that the Europeans have left in Africa. And there's a lot of that tribal warring energy still present in Africa. You know, they connect to it saying, oh, I'm the Yoruba people, or I'm this people. Igbo.
Yes.
But I'm not like just Nigerian. And again, this is a great example of random lines that have been drawn on maps and said, oh, you're now Nigeria, you're now Ghana, when they're really the Yoruba people. And they should have had a Yoruba country, which is a kind of intersection of the two countries. Again, this is a very raw example of it. It's not the reality. I'm not sure if there's actually a landmass that just belongs to Yoruba people. Might be right. But my point of saying this is what imperialism has done to the world. And because we've been born in a world that's created by imperialists, we take it for granted. We think that this is how human beings and human society works. But it's not like that. That's what I find mindfucking. That a few fucking white men at some point just decided this is going to be the future of the human race. And the world has collectively accepted it. If India and Pakistan was still united as one country, it's a revolutionary thought. Because we've seen so much war between the two countries. We've seen animosity between the leaders of the countries. But if we were two countries having the access to all the natural resources in that combined landmass, to the coast in the combined landmass, imagine what that super country would be, that super subcontinent country. If Bangladesh was still a part of it, we had access to all the ports, that coastline, those minerals, those natural resources, which I believe is the future. It's going to happen again. We would be at some other level of being a superpower, and that's probably why the country was divided, to prevent another superpower from being formed. They created a line between human mindsets as well. And now we're fighting as like India and Pakistan. You know, there's so many Indians who have a lot of hate towards Pakistanis. I'm sure that's the same case with Pakistanis. They have hate towards Indians. But we're same, we're brothers and we're sisters, and that's what we need to go back to. I don't know if it'll happen though.
They are bewakoof.
We are living through a transient phase in history.
They are dumb.
This nation-state system, I think it will not last another 100, 200 years. And eventually we're going to go back to civilization states, and it will take time for India, Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh to reunite. But if if there is a strong enough leader. See, a country the size of a subcontinent needs a once in a thousand years kind of leader to unite it because it's too diverse. You need somebody with that sort of willpower to unify everybody.
Exactly.
So if that sort of leader emerges, which is something that may happen once in a thousand years, then the entire subcontinent may unite.
Imran Khan के बस
And
का
then
नहीं
the
है.
subsequent leaders need not be that great or that tall, but they'll be able to carry on the legacy forward. So India awaits the next iteration of its great leaders. We've always had great leaders once in a thousand years. For example, we had Kanishka, who spread Indian influence worldwide almost. Then you had the Chola, Rajendra Chola. And now we are waiting for the next one. And previously we had Chandragupta Maurya, for instance, and we had other kings also in the deep antiquity of India. It's a cyclical process. We are awaiting the next great leader who can reunify the country. If that leader doesn't come soon, we may even fragment further. Anything is possible. These are the forces of history at work.
Yeah, I think you had mentioned this in one of your podcasts, sir, that for us to see political change in our country, it's going to take some time. Because to kind of create political change in our country, you're going to have to go through the political system, which contains a lot of corruption already on every level. You'll have to change yourself fundamentally as a person, and then maybe you'll reach the top. Then maybe you'll become a cabinet minister. Then maybe you'll become something near the PM. And this is going to take probably one whole century to happen, for that change to happen. Not even when I'm in my 40s or I'm in my 50s is it going to happen. And first, we'll just have to strengthen out India. We'll have to kind of clean up the system here, which is when we can think of a sort of unification. It's a very futuristic concept, but I don't know. I hope it happens. And I hope it doesn't have to happen through aggression. It shouldn't. I also remember you mentioned in one of the podcasts, it was either you or Major Gaurav Arya, from a geopolitical angle, you said that the intention of not the everyday Pakistani, who is as friendly to an Indian as your neighbor is to you. You know, the average everyday Indian and the average everyday Pakistani has love for each other. We want to see cricket matches played with each other. We want to get to know each other. You go to Dubai, you talk to a Pakistani, he'll treat you like a brother. Indians and Pakistanis treat each other as like brothers abroad. There's friendliness. It's the leadership and it's the political cores that create wars against each other. My point of saying this is, I think you mentioned that the leadership in Pakistan doesn't just want to take POK and then Kashmir. They want to take over more than that, and they want to destroy like the nation state. Maybe that's true, but do you think that's one part? Do you think aggression will begin that merger of the two countries?
I hope it doesn't go down to that. I do not wish to see anybody anybody die or anything like that. We don't want to see our infrastructure on either side of the border being destroyed, because then you're going to inherit a wasteland. So I would not like to see a violent merger of any kind. I would like to see this happen maybe over a century or so gradually. But it's a very complicated process because there's a difference in religion and cultures, and there's a difference in mindset because people are indoctrinated into certain thought patterns and beliefs, which is very difficult to undo, and there's a great deal of hatred that comes out of it. So I'm not blaming one side or the other, but there is this thing which does exist. And until that root cause can be addressed, I do not see India unifying anytime in the next 50 or 100 years. I would say it would take at least 100 years. Yeah. It's a long-term process, and we are all going to build towards it.
Yeah.
Very nicely
it's a
word
great
here. Abhijit Chavda
emotion to have love for your flag, love for your country, love for your people. But what's also important to know and to be informed about, and this is something that only geopolitical observers and historians kind of have access to. It's a radical thought that might even get people into trouble for voicing it out. But it is important to know that the concept of patriotism, feeling patriotic only for this landmass in those man-made borders, that's a wrong form of patriotism fundamentally. Feel patriotic for your culture, feel patriotic towards your own people, your own community. But if you just say, I'm only patriotic to this landmass, it's fundamentally wrong as a human being, because this form of patriotism is a tool created by higher ups, people up on the political ladder, in order to control mass thought. They put it in our textbooks that you need to feel good towards this landmass and you need to feel hate towards that country and those people. That's a wrong mentality. Patriotism is supposed to be felt towards your culture and towards your own history and towards your own thought process, not towards just a landmass, and especially not towards an ideology that breeds hate against any form of people. If anything you're taught since childhood breeds hate towards other human beings, I feel like that's not correct.
I completely echo what you're saying. Don't be a nationalist, be a civilizationist.
Yeah.
That's what matters. It's about serving a higher purpose, a higher ideal, something bigger and older and larger than yourself. It's about being one link in a very long chain. We are part of a chain that goes back maybe 100,000 years, or if not much more before that. And we would like it to continue another 100,000 years. So we have to all do our part. We are here for a brief amount of time. We are living through a bad time. I think it's always been a bad time in some way or the other, right? The good times are very few and far between, actually, when the whole nation is unified as a civilization and all that. So we are currently fragmented, but having a love only for a certain piece of land is extremely materialistic and very narrow-minded.
Also, if these so-called positive emotions like this form of patriotism breed negativity within you, you need to understand you're being controlled by some external forces that are creating that negativity within you. All forms of these mass thought processes, be it intense religious beliefs or intense nationalist beliefs, which create hate towards other human beings, hate towards other tangents of thought, is actually a form of control. You've become a sort of mental zombie. And you need to unzombie yourself and see the world and see history and see geopolitics from a larger perspective. Why am I feeling hate towards those people? Why am I feeling hate towards that country? Why can't I just feel love towards them? Why
Because
can't I hate the problem and not those people?
they're
Why
sick.
can't I hate the problem and not that country?
They're sick.
But again, this is going to take years because
वो dolphin
the
के साथ
country
sex
as
कर
a
रहे
whole
हैं.
is taught to kind of have patriotism only towards those borders. And
Because
this
they're sick.
happens.
We need the right leaders. We need the right people to show us the right way. And the thing is complicated by the fact that the other country, even if you may love them, they may not want to love you back. So it's going to take time from both sides for things to change. But you're
बहुत अच्छा
absolutely
बोला.
right. Just loving one piece of land is essentially being controlled by certain forces who are teaching you to think in certain patterns, and you don't want that. You want to be able to think beyond any boxes that you are put inside, and that is all about. So it's about you need to love your people, your culture. It doesn't mean you have to hate others.
Yeah.
That is the main thing I would like to say.
I want to highlight Baha'ism. Have you heard of Baha'ism?
I've heard of it.
Yeah, so Baha'ism is a modern day spiritual thought process which some people would consider religion. And the spiritual thought process or the religion says that in a Baha'i church or in a Baha'i temple, you have to go and follow Islam, follow Hinduism, follow Christianity. Whatever you've always been following all your life, you have to keep following those practices. You're free to do the form of prayer that you believe in with a sense of love towards all the other faiths and respect towards all the other faiths. Don't think that you are above anyone else. We're all human beings.
ऐसा कभी नहीं होगा.
And if any thought, any belief, any system that you've grown up with is creating hate within you, understand it's first going to affect yourself. Because what are we at the end of the day? Before even being an Indian, we're human beings. There's no difference between the body structure of you versus the body structure of a Pakistani or the body structure of an Afghan or the body structure of an Iraqi or an American or a Britisher. We're all human beings at the end of the day. And if any of your thought processes is creating hate towards anyone else, any other country, that hate is going to return to you in your daily life in the form of some sort of mental trauma, in the form of some sort of mental aggression. It's not an easy form of living. So in order to be kind to yourself in your daily life, in order to be better with your own mental health, remove the hate from your mind a little bit. Replace that with some
But
sort of
it
love.
should
Replace
happen
that with
from
some sort of compassion.
everyone.
And this is a sort of spiritual way of looking at it, but they say that Baha'ism is the future of the human race, that the whole world is going to follow one thought process, which is the thought process of love. Again, this is over 200, 300
Not gonna
years.
happen. Not gonna
It
happen.
echoes this
Trust me, not gonna happen.
geopolitical thought of fewer borders, fewer separations.
I think it will take time for something like this to
Like
catch on because
million years.
one of the major issues that confronts the world today is these impermeable borders. We are all confined within certain geographical borders, and you need permits and visas and passports to pass through, and you may not be given that. In the past, before this nation state system came in, there were no borders. You could just walk into another country, and if you looked reasonably okay and respectable, they would let you pass through. There was no such system of tight controls. So once you have these rigid borders, it becomes very easy to hate other people. But when you can just travel and walk into another country and pass through it, then you can see much more of the world, and this sort of attitude that this piece of land belongs to me and nobody else, and that doesn't belong to me and it belongs to them. that is what is creating, in my opinion, a great deal of hatred. It is the legacy of the colonial imperialistic system that we have seen in the past 200-300 years that is causing so much strife in the world, so much hatred.
Yeah, you know that whole saying about sometimes decades pass without anything happening, and sometimes there's few months or few weeks where entire decades happen. That's what COVID has done to the human race. And they say that this isn't the last pandemic of this decade, and that there's going to be a lot more. And this isn't me. I've spoken to environmentalists. I've spoken to virology experts who say that the way this virus is mutating, we don't even know what's coming our way. We don't know what's happening with the whole black fungus situation. We don't know what's happening with the Zika virus now. You know, things like this are going to pop up. We're seeing natural calamities all around us. This is some sort of a purge, in my opinion. Something is up. Something is happening.
Something is up and we don't know what it is. Technologies have evolved. Now it is possible to geo-target and ethnically target certain populations with certain gene drives and certain technologies. So it is possible that somebody is fiddling around with the genetic code
China.
of certain viruses. I mean, you see certain strains come out that target certain populations
China.
in certain geographies only, and they are now talking about a third wave that's going to come in. How on earth do they know that this third wave is coming? And maybe then there'll be COVID-22. I mean, this talk is going on. I get the feeling this is the
China ki
decade
maa
of the
ki
virus.
Yeah, same.
Yeah. We thought that 2020 is the bad year. I think it's just the beginning of this decade. I think much more could go wrong, and there is somebody somewhere out there, maybe a group of people. I don't know. I don't want to speculate, but there's clearly something going on which we are not able to perceive thoroughly.
Yeah, maybe it's the Illuminati, a fantastic topic for 1 hour podcast, but I think for this one, this history special, it's called Mindfucking History, and I hope we have messed with some people's minds in a positive way. I think the whole point of Mindfucking History is to make people question what's around them, question the nature of life, get into the process of reading books, get into the process of listening to podcasts like this, to really change your thought process, because at the end of the day, it's going to affect the way
Book
you
nahi pad
view
sakta main.
daily life, you view
I
what's happening
can't.
around you. You unview the status games around us. You know, when people are overly obsessed with politics and who's winning in which state and which party is at the top, at its core, you're fueling status games. At its core, you're fueling status games for yourself. You bring those energies into your daily life. And I love the concept of being a polymath, learning multiple subjects. But again, at its core, I feel like learning is about somewhat fueling your own mind and molding your own mind into a more futuristic version of itself. So keeping that in mind, I hope that people have changed over the course of this 1 hour of mindfucking history. So what is your vibe about doing these podcasts?
I love it. I like this free-flowing format, no set format, no predetermined questions. It's nice. I mean, I enjoy talking to you. You're somebody who's easy to talk to. I can certainly vibe with you, so I enjoy this format.
I'm glad.
Sir,
More podcasts
मेरे
in
साथ
the
भी.
future. Probably the next time we'll do
Sir, एक
more
बात.
questions in these free-flowing tangents.
Absolutely.
But for this one, sir, thank you for being on the show once again.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. So, this was the first episode that we created.
ऑलराइट, तो वीडियो यहाँ पे ख़त्म हो गई है. काश अभिजीत चावड़ा मेरे साथ भी वीडियो कर ले तो बड़ा ही मज़ा आएगा, क्योंकि मुझे बहुत सारे हिस्ट्री को लेके सवाल हैं. मैं पढ़ना नहीं चाहता, क्योंकि मैंने पहले कहा था कि मुझे पढ़ने में बिल्कुल ही मज़ा नहीं आता है. तो अगर ये मुझे बता देंगे तो बड़ा मज़ा आएगा. एनीवे, मैं कुछ पॉइंट अपनी रखना चाहता हूँ इस वीडियो को ज़्यादा लंबा करे हुए. पहली पॉइंट तो यहाँ पे ये है कि मुझे अमेज़ॉन, वो जो पहली वाली बात थी जो कि रणवीर ने कहा कि कैसे वो आदमी खो गया था 9 में और 2 साल के बाद मिला, इट वॉज माइंड ब्लोइंग. मुझे लगा शायद बर्मुडा ट्रायंगल के बारे में बात कर रहे हैं, क्योंकि उन्होंने कहा मेक्सिको क्यूबा और कहीं पे हेती के बराबर में ना उन सीक्वेंस में वो बर्मुडा ट्रायंगल आता है, और वहाँ पे हमेशा सुनने को मिलता है. मेरा प्लान भी था वहाँ जाने का, बर्मुडा ट्रायंगल नहीं, हेती जाने का या कहीं क्रोएशिया जाने का मेरा प्लान था वेकेशन में. जो कि फ़्लाइट जो है फ्लोरिडा से होते हुए क्यूबा बर्मुडा ट्रायंगल के ऊपर होते हुए जाती है. मैंने कहा भैया मैं नहीं जा रहा, मैंने अपना प्लान कैंसिल कर दिया. मैंने कहा भैया मैं नहीं जा रहा, भैया मैं जो हूँ उन हिस्ट्री के पन्नों में नहीं आना चाहता कि एक फ़्लाइट जा रही थी और वहाँ में एक इंडियन आदमी दिल्ली का बिहार का गायब हो गया. मैंने कहा भैया मुझसे नहीं होगा ये, मैं यहीं से देख लूँगा अपना आईपैड में हेटी वेटी जो भी देखना है मुझे, मैं नहीं जाने वाला वहाँ पे. तो ये सीन था. पर आई थिंक रणवीर ने ये रिवील नहीं करा कि ये इंसिडेंट बर्मुडा ट्रायंगल की वजह से था, क्या था, नहीं था, आई डोंट नो. मैं एनीवे, वो मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगा. दूसरा, मुझे अमेज़ॉन का सुन के आई वॉज लिटरली जॉ ड्रॉप्ड, आई वॉज शॉक्ड. वो हिस्ट्री सुन के मैं थोड़ा शॉक्ड हो गया था, आई वॉज लिटरली शॉक्ड कि इतनी। और किसी ने कहा कि इन्होंने बोला, क्या नाम है, अभिजीत चावला ने बोला कि 1 लाख होता है, 100,000 ईयर से भी रह रहे हो लोग, नहीं कि 1 लाख ईयर से रह रहे हो। लाइक व्हाट द हेल, दैट वाज माइंड ब्लोइंग। मैं इसको जाके रिसर्च करूंगा, मैं थोड़ा रिसर्च भी करूंगा और अपनी फियोन्से जी से ही बोलूंगा कि थोड़ा इसके बारे में रिसर्च करके यार मुझे बताना क्या है, क्योंकि वो बहुत ज़्यादा अमेजिंग था। इन्होंने एक और बात बोली कि कैसे अर्थ जो है कूलिंग पीरियड में भी जाता है और अभी हीटिंग पीरियड में जा रहा है। उस चीज़ से मैं कितना एग्री करता हूँ नहीं करता हूँ मैं नहीं कह सकता, क्योंकि मैंने उस चीज़ में मैं एक्सपर्टीज़ नहीं हूँ। तो आई डोंट थिंक सो आई कैन से। इतनी बड़ी बड़ी कंट्री है, इतने एग्रीमेंट साइन कर रही है, वो गधे तो होंगे नहीं, सारी सी बात है। उनके पास एक से एक टॉप लेवल के साइंटिस्ट होंगे, रिसर्चर होंगे, हिस्टोरियन होंगे, एक से एक लेवल के। जाहिर सी बात है अगर वो सारे मिल के इतने एग्रीमेंट साइन कर रहे हैं, फ्रांस कर रहा है, यूएस कर रहा है, इंडिया कर रहा है, तो गधे तो नहीं होंगे। डेफिनेटली देयर माइट बी सम रीजन। तो उस चीज़ से मैं कितना एग्री करता हूँ, मैं उस बात पे उतनी टिप्पणी नहीं देना चाहता। एक चीज़ जो इन्होंने रणवीर ने बोली कि हमें कैसे वी शुड नॉट हेट टुवर्ड्स पर्टिकुलर कंट्री, आई डेफिनेटली एग्री। जैसे कि रणवीर ने बोला कि वी शुड नॉट हेट टुवर्ड्स एनी पर्टिकुलर कंट्री, और हमारे इंडिया का एक कॉन्सेप्ट भी, हम ब्रह्मास्त्र में पूरा ब्रह्मांड हमारा है, और मैं अपने आप को ये मानता हूँ। तो मैं कभी नहीं कहूँगा कि नहीं आई एम वेरी प्राउड इंडियन, नो आई एम ए वेरी प्राउड ब्रह्मांड ब्रह्मांड सिटीजन। आई वुड से दैट कि मैं अमेरिका में अपने आप को उतना ही प्राउड फील करता हूँ जितना कि मैं अपने आप को इंडिया से प्राउड फील करता हूँ। या हो सकता है कि मैं कनाडा जाके भी अपने आप को प्राउड फील करूँ। तो मेरा प्राउडनेस जो है वो किसी पर्टिकुलर लैंड से नहीं है। आई एम वेरी प्राउड टू बी अ पार्ट ऑफ दिस अर्थ और दिस प्लानट। आई एम वेरी प्राउड क्योंकि इंडिया या कनाडा या अमेरिका इज अ पार्ट ऑफ दिस प्लानट एंड आई एम वेरी हैप्पी टू बी पार्ट ऑफ दैट प्लानट। तो मेरा किसी की तरफ हेट नहीं है। काफ़ी लोग कहते हैं कि अमेरिका की तरफ हेट होना चाहिए, नहीं है, ऐसा नहीं है। अमेरिका के लोग बहुत ज़्यादा अच्छे हैं, बहुत ज़्यादा अमेजिंग हैं, बहुत कूल हैं, बहुत रिस्पेक्ट करते हैं। आज मैं इतना सक्सेसफुल हूँ क्योंकि मुझे अमेरिका ने वो एक वैल्यू दी, मुझे एक वैल्यू, मेरी क्वालिटी को एक्सेप्ट किया, मेरे थॉट प्रोसेस को एक्सेप्ट करा, मेरे एजुकेशन को एक्सेप्ट करा। मैं इंडिया में भाई जस्ट पास स्टूडेंट था, मैं कभी टॉप में नाम नहीं आया मेरा, कभी मिडिल में भी नहीं आया, और सिर्फ जस्ट पास की कैटेगरी में सिर्फ मेरा नाम आता था। तो अगर वैसे स्कोर करके मैं इंडिया में कुछ करता तो शायद मैं कभी कुछ कर नहीं पाता, पर मुझे एक अपॉर्चुनिटी मिली अमेरिका में। तो मैं ये ज़रूर कहना चाहता हूँ कि ऐसा बिल्कुल भी नहीं है, एंड आई लव एवरी पार्ट ऑफ दिस कंट्री एक्सेप्ट फ्यू कंट्री, जो जैसे कि पाकिस्तान हो गया या अफगानिस्तान हो गया। जैसे कि रणवीर ने कहा कि हमें बॉर्डर की उस तरफ हेट करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है। भाई आप उनकी मेंटालिटी तो जाके देखो, कैसे हेट ना करे आदमी। मतलब हेट क्या, एक बहुत ही डिस्कस्ट फील होता है। डिस्कस्ट फील इन द सेंस कि मैं आप लोगों से नहीं कह रहा हूँ कि आप हेट करो। जैसे कि अगर मुझे पता चलेगा कि मेरे पड़ोसी में जो आदमी है वो जानवरों का रेप करता है, तो जाहिर सी बात है भाई, वो सुन के तो मुझे लगेगा ही नहीं कि मैं कहाँ रह रहा हूँ। तो मैं कैसे हाउ कैन आई लव पीपल ऑन दैट पर्टिकुलर रीजन दैट इफ़ आई नो दैट दे आर डूइंग दिस काइंड ऑफ स्टफ। मतलब कि वो तो सुन के मेरी तो माँ बहने को जाएगी। तो वही है, अभी मुझे पता चला रिसेंटली कि डॉल्फिन के साथ कैसे अब्यूजिव बिहेवियर होता है, बिल्लियों के साथ, डेड बॉडी के साथ। तो भाई मैं कैसे कर सकता हूँ, मैं बच्चाबाजी होती है। हाउ कैन आई लव। ठीक है, देखो चाइना से नहीं हो सकता, चाइना बहुत ही एग्रेसिव है। पाकिस्तान नो, अफगानिस्तान नो, जितनी भी मिडिल ईस्ट कंट्री हैं उनसे प्यार करना बहुत ही इम्पॉसिबल टाइप का है, क्योंकि उनकी आइडियोलॉजी बहुत ज़्यादा स्ट्रिक्ट है, उनमें ओपननेस नहीं है लाइफ में। तो मैं ये नहीं कर सकता, दिस इज समथिंग वेरी हार्ड एंड आई डोंट थिंक सो आई कैन डू दैट। ये मैं मानता हूँ, मुझे नहीं लगता कि मैं ऐसी कोई चीज़ कर सकता हूँ। मैं ये नहीं कर सकता। तो रणवीर हो सकता है कहना चाह रहे हो, जाहिर सी बात है यार, रणवीर की अपनी इमेज है। अभिजीत चावड़ा ने भी कहा है कि हेटरिज्म बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ रहा है। ये सच बात है, हेटरिज्म बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ रहा है। हम अंग्रेज़ों को, अब कुछ लोग जो होते हैं वो अमेरिकन अंग्रेज़ों को लेकर गाली दे रहे होते हैं कि तुमने हमारे देश पे कब्जा किया। अरे भैया, उस अंग्रेज़ में और ब्रिटिशर अंग्रेज़ में फ़र्क है। दे आर डिफरेंट वाइट पीपल है, दे आर डिफरेंट वाइट पीपल, इसमें दो फ़र्क है। लोग फ़र्क समझते नहीं है। जैसे कि मैंने बताया कि अभी कुछ टाइम पहले ना स्नैपचैट के सीईओ ने कुछ कह दिया था, लोगों में इतना हेट बढ़ा हुआ था कि लोगों को ये समझ में नहीं आया कि स्नैपचैट की बात है। लोग स्नैपडील पे जाके प्ले स्टोर पे गालियां लिखने लगे, और भाई उसकी रेटिंग गिरा दी, एक स्टार गिरा दिया स्नैपडील पे। स्नैपडील को ऑफिशियल स्टेटमेंट रिलीज करना पड़ा कि भैया वो बात स्नैपचैट की हुई थी, स्नैपडील की नहीं। तो इससे पता चलता है कि कितने हेटरिज्म भरा हुआ है लोगों। लोग बस बैठे हुए हैं कि बस हमें मिले और पेल दें हम। तो ये कहीं ना कहीं रणवीर ने बहुत अच्छा बोला। आई थिंक मुझे लगता है कि वो लोग जो ओपननेस को एक्सेप्ट करते हैं, जो डाइवर्सिटी को एक्सेप्ट करते हैं, हमें उनसे प्यार रखना चाहिए। और जैसे अमेरिका हो गया, कनाडा हो गया, जितनी भी डेवलप कंट्री है, फ्रांस है, ये यूके अलग अलग कंट्री है। यूके पहले तो हरामी हुआ करता था, पर अभी ओपननेस हो चुका है। तो इन कंट्री को हमें रिस्पेक्ट करना चाहिए। जर्मनी हो गया, इज्जत करनी चाहिए, प्यार करना चाहिए। पर जो कंट्री ओपननेस नहीं है, जैसे अफगानिस्तान हो गया, पाकिस्तान हो गया, मिडिल ईस्टर्न कंट्री, हम उनसे कैसे रखें? हम नहीं रख सकते भाई, वो ओपन नहीं है बिल्कुल भी। तो ये समझना बहुत ज़रूरी है। ये भी एक डिफरेंस अगर ये अपनी वीडियो में कवर करते तो शायद मज़ा आता। पर कहीं ना कहीं अभिजीत छावड़ा ने बोला कि हमारे लिए ये इंपॉर्टेंट है कि अगर हम प्यार कर रहे हैं तो वो भी हमसे प्यार करे वापस। ये मैं बोलना चाह रहा था। हम पाकिस्तानियों को प्यार करें, वो साले हमें गाली दे, बोले गजवाई हिंद होगा, तो थोड़ी ना ऐसे प्यार होगा भाई। ऐसे प्यार नहीं हो सकता। प्यार एक साइड, वन साइड लव इज ऑलवेज वेरी हार्मफुल। तो मैं यही बोलना चाहता हूँ, इफ रणवीर विल एवर वॉच माई वीडियो, विच आई नो ही वोंट बिकॉज आई एम सच ए स्मॉल यूट्यूबर, बट इफ ही एवर वॉच दिस वीडियो, आई जस्ट वांट टू से रणवीर, वन साइड लव इज ऑलवेज वेरी 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 डेंजरस एंड हार्मफुल। क्योंकि उसमें इंसान का हमेशा दिल ही टूटता है। अगर ऐसे प्यार करेंगे तो साला कंट्री टूट जाएगी। इसलिए वन साइड लव इज नेवर नेवर गुड, नेवर गुड। तो मैं यही बोलना चाहता हूँ। एनीवे, ये मेरा ओपिनियन था इस चीज़ को लेके। आप क्या सोचते हैं, नहीं सोचते हैं, मुझे कमेंट सेक्शन में बताना। और मैं आपसे मिलता हूँ नेक्स्ट वीडियो में। तब तक के लिए टेक केयर और अपना ध्यान रखें।